I'm just not sure that African Americans truly understand the threat that we're in because of the intersection between the GOP, Republican politics, and white nationalism. I just get the sense that African Americans really don't quite understand that the rights that we hold precious and dear, things like the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Voting Rights Act, which has already been gutted, these rights and others that we hold dear that give us the right to do just basic things really hang in the balance because of the, again, intersection between the GOP, white nationalism, and white supremacy. It's happening all around us, and yet I don't sense that urgency, that fierce urgency of now that Dr. King talked about. I don't sense it with African Americans. I'm just really concerned. And so I keep sounding the alarm and stuff that's going on today in GOP politics as they relate to white nationalism. Yes, I am both upset, saddened, and profoundly concerned because I don't sense it. I don't sense that we as a people, African Americans, truly understand what is being done in this nation politically. And I'm talking about in every area of the government. I'm talking about the Supreme Court, the Congress, the White House, state houses, local politics, even churches. I'm not certain that we get it. And so I feel concerned because unless we understand the threat that we're under, see, let me say this. When the Civil War ended, we had that 10-year period called Reconstruction where we were able to get some rights passed. And it was the only reason why we were able to get it passed was because at that time, the Republicans, which was the party that actually worked to free enslaved Africans, the party of Lincoln, the party of true freedom at that time, because the Civil War had just been won in favor of the enslaved Africans and the Union Army, we were able to get the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments passed. I want you to you got to understand what that means. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery for the most part, with the exception of those who are convicted of a felony, then they basically become a slave again. But for the most part, slavery has been abolished. Then the 14th Amendment gave us citizenship rights. Why was that important? Because Roger Taney, Chief Justice at that time, wrote an opinion in the Dred Scott opinion, where he literally said that Africans have no rights, or anyone whose mother is an African have no rights in America. And shortly after that the worst U.S. Supreme Court opinion ever written, shortly after that opinion, the abolitionists knew, okay, they have basically tied our hands and we're going to have to fight this out. And the first shots of the Civil War were fired from South Carolina. Those amendments to the Constitution, then the 15th Amendment, gave us the right to vote. Those amendments hang in the balance. One of the things the GOP, I talked about this a few weeks ago. I need to just keep saying stuff. One of the things the GOP is trying to do is win a certain number of state houses. Because if they win a certain number of state houses, guess what they can do? They can try to amend the Constitution again. And this time, they could try to put in the Constitution a sort of permanent set of a permanent amendment that protects white supremacy, white nationalism. And they're real close to doing it. They're real close to having the 2/3 of the state houses that they need to try to amend the U.S. Constitution. Most African Americans don't even know that that's what's going on. But this thing is being fought not only on the state level, but on the national level. Listen, they have 6 U.S. Supreme Court justices on the courts, on SCOTUS, on the U.S. Supreme Court. They have basically a supermajority. They can basically do whatever they want to do. 6 versus 3. There's nothing the progressives can do. Those who tend to be in favor of racial justice, there's nothing that they can do. Nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We got the Brown versus Board of Education decision in the mid-50s. I'm telling you that the GOP want to overturn Brown. They want to overturn Brown. And Brown is sort of the bedrock. It overturned Plessy v. Ferguson that talked about, that mandated equal, separate but equal. Brown basically got rid of segregation, called it inherently evil, and what the GOP wants to do is they want to get rid of Brown. They want to overturn Brown. Man, we are still fighting that civil war that I just talked about. We're still fighting that. After that 10-year, 11, 12-year period of Reconstruction, another phase started called redemption, and this is where the South rose, cut a deal with President Cleveland Glover Cleveland, pardon me, and he basically allowed the South to basically regain control of the South. He basically allowed those men who had fought to keep slavery going, the Confederate Army. He fought. Okay, I'm getting a notice here that something is not. Looks like we're not showing on YouTube. Okay, whatever. That's going to have to be okay. I'll just upload the video after this. But the men who fought in the Confederate War to keep slavery going, they regained the South. And they implemented black code laws. They implemented Jim Crow, right? They, as a result of them doing that, this Reconstruction legislature, Congress, was able to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1871, which is also known as the Ku Klux Klan Act. And believe it or not, every day, my law firm uses the Ku Klux Klan Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1871, to fight for racial justice. We still use that law to this day. The GOP want to gut it. They want to gut other laws that, again, protect our precious rights, folks. This is why this is so serious. I know this because I'm an attorney, because I know the law, because I've been in this space for 20 years. And I'm telling you, we are in a serious battle. And that battle has increased. It increased since Donald Trump, because We all know, or we should know, that essentially what Trump said to the GOP, to Republicans, to white conservatives, white evangelicals, he said basically, stop being ashamed of being white supremacists. Because if you don't be white supremacists, I keep getting notes here. I'm sorry. If you don't be white supremacists, you're going to lose your country. Okay? And so he basically radicalized the GOP. And so they are now seriously contending to protect white supremacy and white nationalism. All right? That's what we're going to look at today. Okay? Let's get started. All right, the dangerous intersection of Republican politics and white nationalism. I think a very good place to start is by defining what white nationalism is. Get your pencil, get your phone, take a snapshot, okay? Look at this. Look at this definition. I need you to understand what this says. I need you to understand what this says. All right, here we go. White nationalism, a political ideology that advocates for a nation or state composed solely of people of European descent. White nationalists believe that white people are under threat from immigration. How much talk do you hear about immigration? How much talk do you, as a matter of fact, Donald Trump came down the escalator to announce his candidacy, basically saying that Mexicans were murderers or murderers and rapists. And then he began, you may have forgotten a lot of this stuff, then he began to implement all types of anti-immigration policy and began to say all types of anti-immigration rhetoric. You remember he even banned Muslims from coming in this country. So let's go back. I got receipts. We got trolls up here saying that this is hilarious and what it is not. This is truthful. This is facts. This is history. Okay. A political ideology that advocates for a nation or state composed solely of people of European descent. This is important because about 20 years ago, a man by the name of Pat Buchanan, some of you may not even be old enough to remember Pat Buchanan, but Pat Buchanan began to talk about how the West was being overtaken by people of color. And he began to hit Pat Buchanan was a journalist. He's pretty old now. I haven't seen him probably a decade, but his books are out there. His rhetoric is out there. And basically what Pat Buchanan said to white people here in America is, we're losing our country. They're taking over. You got people, you got the Mexicans coming up the south border. You got blacks coming in from everywhere. You remember Donald Trump called African nations where we are from, black folks, he called them S-hole nations. He said everybody in Haiti has AIDS, okay? We're talking about a blatant white supremacist, a blatant white supremacist who got about 70-80% of the white vote here in this country. A blatant white. I can't even list all the things that Trump did to blatantly exhibit his white supremacy. All right? So people like Pat Buchanan begin to sow the seed, begin to start telling whites that you are being replaced. You are losing your nation. You are going to be powerless in your own country. And then guess what happens? that really, really, really made folks go bonkers. Obama was elected president. That, in their minds, proved that Pat Buchanan and those other fearmongers are correct. A black man with the name of Barack Hussein Obama. Barack Hussein Obama was elected president. What did that say to them? Oh my God, it is true. We are losing this nation. We have lost this nation. We must get busy, and we must get busy now. And so they said, who can we turn to? And there was a man who supposedly has billions, a man who told the first black president that he was a illegitimate president, that he was not born in this country, that he's truly not an American. Spent 6 years floating those lies, okay? They found their man. They found a man who has no morality, no principles. He will say and do anything. Now, this is the same party. Look, I'm 61 years old. I've been around a while, okay? I have been a Democrat. I was a Republican. I have voted for Republicans. I'm now independent. That's why I know these trolls. I know what I'm talking about. I went to one of the most conservative law schools in the country, okay? Regent School of Law, founded by Pat Robertson, okay? I was a card-carrying Republican for 20 years. I know what I'm talking about. I know what they're doing. I know what they're doing. I'm giving you their playbook. I'm giving you their playbook. Because even when I was a Republican because my faith calls me to take a very strong and principled stand against abortion. Okay, I mean I'm a very dedicated Christian, so I and a Pentecostal Christian at that. So there are certain things I just don't agree with, and that's why today I'm neither Democrat or Republican. By the way, just for you trolls, I'm neither. But even when I was a Republican, I would not sell out. They tried to get me to. They tried to get me to sell out. I would not sell out. I would not, because I am not going to support white supremacy, white nationalism. I'm not going to do that. I know I'm from the South. I can connect my history. I've done my family research. My family was enslaved in North Carolina, and my paternal family was enslaved in Georgia. My great-great-grandfather, Thomas Williams, and his wife, my great-great-grandmother, Emily Williams, were slaves on the William Plantation. The William Plantation was overseen or owned by Captain David Henry Williams, who was a captain in the Confederate Army. Okay? That's how my family got the Williams name. All right? I know my history. I know what I'm talking about here. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, Donald Trump was their go-to guy. They loved him, still love him, again, because he doesn't have any principles. For a long time, in the 70s and the 80s, people like Ronald Reagan, Jerry Falwell, others like that started an organization called the Moral Majority. The Moral Majority, okay? And then it was all about electing people that they said had family values, Christian people. And they went from that to Donald Trump. Why? Because of the fear of losing America. And that fear was cemented in their minds and hearts when Barack Obama was elected president. And then guess what happened? he was reelected. Oh my God. What was their reaction? One of their reactions, well, first of all, they called him everything but a child of God. I've never seen anyone so disrespected. Him and his wife, and his family. Okay? That's the caliber of people that we're dealing with here. Look. Mm, 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 mm. But what did they do politically? In 2012, they gutted the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act required that certain states, which were notorious for voter suppression, those states had to get pre-clearance. They had to get approval from the Justice Department before they made any changes to their voting laws to make sure they were not trying to suppress black votes. Well, 2012, they gutted that. A 5-4 vote. They gutted it. And I'm going to come back to that in just a moment when I talk about Clarence Thomas. I'm going to come back to the Voting Rights Act. Okay? But they gutted it. Why? Because of fear. White fear. I haven't read Roland Martin's book yet, but that's what he's talking about in that book. And I strongly suggest you get it. I got a book coming out soon entitled White First. White First. And I'm writing that from the perspective of how over the last few years we've seen, since the founding of the country, actually, we've seen white Christians put whiteness first, okay, before their Christianity. Race trumped their Christianity. So I'm writing a book now entitled White First. Roland Martin has a book out, White Fear. There's another good book out there, White Fragility. This is what we're dealing with. So Donald Trump basically is white backlash. And they completely flipped on this moral majority. We want a Christian leader. We want a moral person. We want somebody who has strong family values and so forth. They threw all that to the wind and said, give us the guy who's been married multiple times, who admitted to doing all kinds of things. Oh my God. Who is on the record being racist, who was sued in the 70s for discriminating against black people. I could go on and on and on. They completely flipped and voted for this guy and support him even to this day. He's probably going to be their nominee again, despite being impeached twice, despite having 34 felony charges and more coming, most likely. Despite all of that and all the other stuff that he did, they're probably going to go with him again. Why? White fear, white first, white fragility. Okay? White fear, white first, white fragility. All right? Now, let's go back. White nationalism, a political ideology that advocates for a nation or state composed solely of people of European descent. White nationalists believe that white people are under threat from immigration, multiculturalism, globalization, and that they need to preserve their racial and cultural identity in order to survive. They may also promote the ideal of voluntary segregation, where different racial groups live separately, one from another. Didn't we just hear Marjorie Taylor Greene just recently say that blue and red states should separate? This is pure white nationalism that we're seeing dominating the GOP. These are facts. I don't care about somebody talking about it's hilarious. These are facts. Those pesky little things called facts, right? Just facts, because these folks are not trying to hide it anymore. They used to try to hide it. They are not trying to hide it anymore. Trump said, don't be ashamed. Trump said, come out the closet and just stand up and be proud that you tamed this country. You remember he said that? Don't apologize for that, because if you be weak, you remember the speech he gave just before his people bombarded the Capitol building. Remember, he said, if you be weak, you're going to lose your country. And they went in that Congress and they tried to overthrow the government. Okay? White nationalism. Let's go back. I'm giving you facts. I'm giving you facts. They may also promote the ideal of voluntary segregation where different racial groups live separately one from another, and may advocate for policies such as strict immigration controls, cultural assimilation, and economic protectionism. All right, that's white nationalism. Here's white supremacy, a more extreme and militant ideology that seeks to establish the dominance of the white race over other races. Now, go back to Charlottesville. Go back to Charlottesville when the Nazis showed up at Charlottesville, Virginia, protesting the removal of, I think it was General Lee, the statue of General Lee, and were out there with torches and were chanting, "You will not replace us. You will not replace us. You will not replace us." White replacement, the white replacement theory, all again coming out of white fear, white fragility, white thirst, white nationalism, a fear of losing their so-called country, although it's my folk who really built this country. Okay, it's people of color, black folks to be specific, who literally for 250 years built this country. Yet here my country, we're losing my country. Like no one else has done anything in this country when we built it and never got paid for it. Never got paid for it. Okay? White supremacy. Let's go back. A more extreme and militant ideology that seeks to establish the dominance of the white race over others. White supremacists believe that white people are inherently superior to people of other races and that they have a right to dominate and control non-white populations. They may also promote the ideal of forced segregation, where different racial groups are forcibly separated from one another, and may advocate for policies such as racial purity, eugenics. Here, that what we're dealing with is a hybrid of white nationalism and white supremacy. We see it with our own eyes. January 6th, Charlottesville. And by the way, what did Trump say following Charlottesville? He called the Nazis very fine people. He called them very fine people. Nazis. People who hate people. People who are full of hate because of their skin color. He called them very fine people. Remember, there was a young white woman out there, and by the way, not all whites buy into this. Not all whites buy into white supremacy. Not all whites are ruled by white fear, fragility, and thirst. Not all whites. You look back over the history of this country, there were some tremendous, Thaddeus Stevens come to mind, John Brown comes to mind, who stood shoulder to shoulder with black folks on the principle of everyone is equal in God's sight. And slavery is horrible, horrendous. There were white people who took that stand and who died to end slavery. So not all white people are that way. That is definitely not what I'm saying. But enough of them are that they are right now speaking loudly for white society in this country. Okay? So we're dealing with both a virulent strain of white supremacy and also white nationalism. And this is not necessarily a Christian broadcast, but white Christian nationalism as well. And that's where there's the belief that America is this Christian country, that God created America, that America, white Americans are the chosen people, all of that stuff. Okay? And you see that as well. All right, let's move on because I want to show you how this is actually playing out on a weekly and daily basis. All right, let's go. Let's start with the now fired Tucker Carlson. Here's something Tucker said. Tucker said, a couple of weeks ago, I was watching video of people fighting on the street in Washington. A group of Trump guys surrounded an Antifa kid and started pounding the living blank out of him. It was 3 against 1 at least. Jumping a guy like that is dishonorable, obviously. It's not how white men fight. When I read that, let me just stop there when he said it's not how white men fight. I had to laugh. It's not how white men fight. How many white men showed up, drug a 14-year-old boy out of his bed at midnight and lynched him? Talking about Emmett Till. How many men did that? How many white men did that? How many white men surrounded and shot Ahmaud Arbery to death? How many did that? I believe it was 3, right? Right? How many Emmett Till? At least 2, right? And they forced a black guy to even participate. So I don't know what I don't know what he's talking about. Okay, that was weird. That was weird. I can't begin to tell you how many white men have showed up and outnumbered folks, outgunned people, and lynched them, even burned down complete cities, or at least the black parts of town. All right, Tulsa comes to mind. Rosewood, Florida comes to mind. Atlanta comes to mind. Oh, come on. What is Tucker Carlson talking about? Anyway, he said, yet suddenly, watch this, I found myself rooting for the mob against the man, hoping they'd hit him harder, kill him. I really wanted them to hurt the kid. I could taste it. Then somewhere deep in my brain, an alarm went off. This isn't good for me. I'm becoming something I don't want to be. The Antifa creep is a human being. Much as I despise what he says and does, much as I'm sure I'd hate him personally if I knew him, I shouldn't gloat over his suffering. I should be bothered by it. I should be bothered by it. I should be bothered by it. But I'm not. I should remember that somewhere somebody probably loves this kid and would be crushed if he was killed. If I don't care about those things, if I reduce people to their politics, how am I better than he is? Yet, that's exactly what he felt. Tucker Carlson described the heart of a white supremacist. He described it. He said, I could taste of his death. I craved for his death. I wanted them to hit him harder. All because of what he believed. All because I presume I presume, I don't know. I presume the kid was, and by the way, he called him a kid, so it was probably a young dude. Okay? I presume the dude was white because he didn't say he was black. All right? So Tucker, is upset with the guy's beliefs. That people should be treated fairly. Okay? That can get you hate, even if you're a white person, from white supremacists. Going back to Charlottesville, Virginia, remember, I can't think of her name, but a young white woman was killed out there that day, ran over by a white supremacist. All right? How else is this playing out? Tucker Carlson, by the way, before we move from him, had the biggest following on cable TV of all cable TV, of all of them, of CNN, MSNBC, Fox, OAN, all the rest of them. Tucker, with this kind of vile hatred that he spewed every day on his show, he had the biggest following in the country. What does that say? What does that say? What does that say? Now, let's talk about some of the politicians. Georgia's GOP governor signs bill that could remove local prosecutors and DAs from their jobs. When I read this, it didn't shock me, but my mouth did drop. So now they can go in the state of Georgia and say, okay, to the elected district attorney, you're out. Forget the will of the people. Forget, watch this, forget states' rights. Forget the 11th Amendment, which they harp on so much. Okay? Forget all that. You're out because we don't like your politics. And oh, by the way, what is happening in Georgia right now? Trump may be indicted. Fannie Willis, the DA there in Fulton County, I believe, one of those counties there, essentially announced that come this summer, she will announce probably an indictment of Donald Trump. At least that's the way it came out. I mean, the way it was said. Well, there is a good chance that before that indictment is released or afterwards, Brian Kemp and the GOP are going to walk in there in her office and give her until evening to leave her office. They got that law passed. This is white nationalism. This is white nationalism. And we're talking about the same state that already said you can't give someone some water if they are standing in a long voting line. You're talking about a state here who took away, who slashed early voting, who slashed polling locations, who got out the voter police out there to try and intimidate people from voting because they know they can't win. So they got to do all this stuff. So they can literally walk into an elected official, an elected DA's office and say, your time is up. You got until this evening. You got until Friday. We'll give you 30 days. Until then, you know what? Reminds me of Mississippi that recently set up a whole quasi-court over Jackson, Mississippi, the capital city and the city that has the most black folks of any city in America. They just said, we setting up a whole new system. We don't care about the elected officials here, whatever. We're setting up our own system. This is white nationalism. And also white supremacy. Because there are people who will enforce this stuff violently, virulently. Okay? These are facts. These are facts. I'm not making any of this up. These are facts. Florida, DeSantis. He has a vote. Well, they also down there. He just recently signed into law over the past couple of years an anti-CRT bill, an anti-protest bill. You can't teach African-American history down there. He doesn't want all this hatefulness that we have seen come from these folks for the last 400 years, we don't want you telling our children about it. We don't want you telling our children how nasty and ugly and hateful we have been to these other people because of the color of their skin. You may make our children think that we are monsters, so we're not going to let you teach this in class. I'd be shamed too. I'd be shamed as well. But guess what? They got help. They got help. Mark Robinson, Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, my home state. Mark Robinson is running for the governorship in the state of North Carolina. I don't know this guy that well, and I understand he's a Christian man, and I'm a Christian man. So I'm sure there are some things that we do agree on, but I strongly oppose him becoming governor because Mr. Robinson seems to be willing to say anything to cozy up to white conservatives. And like I said, even when I was a card-carrying member of the Republican Party, I would not sell out. I'm not calling Mr. Robinson a sellout. The man may just sincerely believe what he believes. But he said something that is just totally bizarre. It is bizarre. I want you to hear it for yourself. I'm going to try to play it here. Let me see if I can get it to play.
There are some people that were talking about reparations in this country. They wanted reparations. And I remember I made this particular liberal so angry at me because I told them right to their face, nobody owes you anything for slavery. If you want to tell the truth about it, it is you who owe. It's you who owe. Somebody, after those fields were ended and slavery was ended, somebody had to walk through Jim Crow for you. Somebody fought wars and died for you. Somebody lived less than because they didn't have what you have, and they did it for you. There are people in their graves right now, and they are there because they were willing to stand up and fight for you. Those folks on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, carrying American flags, take that calling. Living in a society that he could scarcely acknowledge, something that he has never known, living with a bigotry that none of us can imagine. Carried American flags on that bridge. And when they were hit upside the head with nightsticks and shot with water hoses and knocked to the ground, they got up and picked those flags up and they did it for you. Nobody owes you anything. If anybody owes, it's you. Because you've been the benefactor of freedom. You are the one that owes.
That is, and I'm being kind. That is bizarre. That is bizarre. Let me go a little further. That's asinine. As best as I can understand what this man is saying, even if you don't agree with reparations, which I do, I strongly believe that African Americans are owed reparations. I remember my first year of law school. I was sitting in a class called torts. Torts is a class where you learn about personal injury stuff, where you learn about the doctrine of negligence, where you learn about how under the law, if you injure someone negligently, and even if you injure, this is not covered in the torts class, but there's also law that says if you intentionally injure someone, then you should compensate them. You should put them back where you found them, in the same place that you found them. okay? And I asked, I raised my hand in that class. And this was, again, at Pat Robertson's Law School, Regent University Law School, okay? Where I was just a few blacks in the class, and everybody there were mostly white, very conservative people. Very conservative people. But I didn't care, all right? I raised my hand, and I said, then what is the problem with reparations? If the law says that a person should put somebody back where they were economically when you found them because of your negligent action or your intentional action, then what is the problem with reparations? And you would have thought that I stood up and just cussed everybody out. The reaction that I got. Okay? I mean, the class just boo, ooh, 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 ooh. I didn't care. I didn't care. So what? I knew they were going to react that way. But this is supposed to be a Christian law school. This is supposed to be a Christian law school. Even the Bible says that folks were to give restitution when they harm someone. We see it every day when I represent some folks in the criminal court system. The judge will order them, you give this person, your victim, you give them restitution. You pay for that car. You pay for this. You pay for that. You damaged it. You did that in the commission of your crime. You restore them. But not when it comes to black folks. The Japanese got it. Even some of the slave owners got reparations. But not black people, not African Americans. Anyway, even if you disagree with reparations, that's one thing. But to go further and say the descendants of slaves should pay, as best as I can understand it, should pay their ancestors for enduring slavery is, I almost said stupid, but I'm trying to be respectful to this guy. It is twisted. It's bizarre. And that's what I think he's saying. He's saying you should be the one paying. They did it for you. They did it for you. So who is he has to be talking about the people who endured slavery and Jim Crow. So he's saying the descendants of those people should pay their ancestors for enduring slavery and Jim Crow. Really? So the people who enslaved, the people who lynched, raped, murdered, the people who did that, no penalty for them, no punishment for them, no restitution for them. I mean, it's hard to even formulate thoughts with this. I mean, seriously? And this is the man who's running to be the governor of North Carolina, and he might win. He may win. And while we're talking about North Carolina, while I got North Carolina on the mind, on my brain, North Carolina did something else recently. On April 28th, the new Republican majority on the North Carolina Supreme Court, I'm not going to read this, you can read it here, but they reversed the North Carolina Supreme Court when it was Democrat majority. The Democrat majority said that the voting maps of the GOP-controlled state house was basically racial gerrymandering. That is, they carved the maps up to give the GOP an advantage. the Democrat control, at that time it was Democrat control. It was an African-American woman who was Chief Justice, actually, and she stepped down to run for the Senate. I believe she stepped down. Maybe she lost. I don't know. I haven't been keeping up with the intricacies of North Carolina politics. But anyway, the North Carolina Supreme Court shifted back from Democrat control to Republican control. And the Republican-controlled North Carolina Supreme Court said, basically, that we're going to disregard what our Democrat-controlled colleagues did by finding these maps to be racial gerrymandering, and we're going to put them back in place, which now gives the GOP the political and racial advantage in North Carolina. They just flipped it. This is white nationalism. Mark Robinson is running for office so that he can help ensure that this white nationalist agenda is protected. Now tell me this. Help me understand this. If you want to comment on something, you all, help me understand why Mark Robinson is trying to protect white nationalism. He's not white. Why is he trying to protect white supremacy? I have that question for my black conservative brothers. Why are you trying to protect white nationalism? Why are you being willfully blind? The party that you are so fiercely a part of are in your face blatantly passing laws and regulations and everything else to protect white nationalism, white supremacy. Why do you as an African American support that? Even when I was a Republican, I did not support that. That's why I'm no longer a Republican. I didn't support that. I can't support that. I mean, my folks were enslaved by the ancestors of these folks that are controlling these state houses. I mean, Mitch McConnell, for example, we know his family owned slaves. He and I see the world completely different. Totally. So why am I going to work with Mitch McConnell when I know Mitch is coming from that enslaver perspective? I don't understand. I'm going to read some of y'all's comments here in a minute. Maybe y'all can help me out. But wow. Wow. All right, let's move on. Let's move on. Couple more things I want to show you here. Justice Clarence Thomas took Justice Thurgood Marshall's seat, was nominated by the first Bush president, not the son, but the father. And he's been on the court ever since. I remember the tumultuous confirmation hearing that he had. It was really, really, really an ugly process for everybody involved, Anita Hill and him. Okay, it was ugly. It got ugly. And as a licensed attorney, let me say this, as a licensed attorney, I have ethical rules that prevent me from speaking disparagingly against a judge. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to give you the facts or the alleged facts. Okay? because this is bothersome. This is very, very, very bothersome. What has come out in recent weeks about Justice Thomas. But I'm not going to conclude that he has done anything unethical. In fact, they don't have ethics. Like I have ethics as a little local lawyer here in Texas, but the highest court, those 9 people, from my understanding, they don't have a code of canon of a code of ethics. Okay, they don't have that they have to abide by, from what I understand. All right. So that said, let's go back to what Justice Thomas allegedly did between him and his wife. Very big deal. Let's see here. Conservative judicial activist Leonard Leo. He is or was, he's over several nonprofits. I think he's an attorney. He was at least one time, or still may be, over or affiliated with the Federalist Society. He arranged for the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Jenny Thomas, to be paid tens of thousands of dollars for consulting work just over a decade ago, specifying that her name be left off billing paperwork, according to documents reviewed by the Washington Post in December 2012. Remember 2012. Remember that year. I'm coming back to it. The Judicial Education Project submitted an amicus brief, that is a document or brief that people who are not really involved in a case can submit to the Supreme Court on important cases. Now notice what his organization submitted an amicus brief on. Shelby County versus Holder, a case challenging a landmark civil rights law, that would be the Voting Rights Act, aimed at protecting minority voters. So here, let me simplify that. This is so troublesome for me. The 15th Amendment, which says the right to vote shall not be abridged. It was specifically passed for the newly freed African American citizens. They couldn't vote, and so the Congress, during Reconstruction, added the 15th Amendment to the Constitution. But it wasn't enforceable. It was just an amendment. So Congress also passed 100 years later the Voting Rights Act to give some teeth to the 15th Amendment. Because despite the 15th Amendment, states like Georgia and Louisiana and North Carolina and South Carolina and Alabama, they, despite the 15th Amendment, put all types of hurdles in front of black folks to vote. We have seen the marches, the march across Edmund Pettus Bridge that Mark Robinson talked about. We have seen people getting beat up, water hoses being let loose on them, dogs being let loose on them. All of that, a lot of it had to do with the right to vote. Okay? And so we prevailed. And we got the Voting Rights Act passed. Now, what did the Voting Rights Act do? As I explained earlier, what it does, or what it did, it's been gutted now, but what it did was it said to those notorious states that would require our ancestors to count how many beans are in a jar, or how many bubbles in a bar of soap, or whether or not their great-grandfather had voted, which of course not. They couldn't vote. So they had all those kinds of hurdles, poll taxes, etc. States that did that were specifically written into the Voting Rights Act, basically saying, you folks must stop this, and here's how we're going to make you stop it. First of all, you got to stop these voter suppression laws. And before you enact any state law having to do with voting, you got to submit some paperwork, show the Justice Department what you intend to do, so that the Justice Department can make sure you're not trying to do some hanky-panky and basically suppress black votes. And it worked well. It worked well. So well that Barack Obama got elected. That was the result of the Voting Rights Act. So they said, we must go after that. And they did. They did. They had been going at it for decades, ever since it was passed. But they were able to gut it with the 5-4 vote. One of the people who voted for it, Clarence Thomas. The same Clarence Thomas whose wife had gotten tens of thousands of dollars from an organization that submitted an amicus brief to the Supreme Court in favor of gutting the Voting Rights Act. Now, all right, just to be fair, I don't know if Clarence Thomas knew his wife got the money. I don't know whether she got the money or not, it influenced his vote. I don't know. I do know this. There is not a lot that goes on in my house that my wife does or that I do that the other doesn't know about. I also know that a whole lot of what we do, we discuss so that we can be in agreement about it, or at least have our opinion heard. That's pretty typical for a marriage, for a married couple. So I'm not saying that Leo Leonard bought Clarence. I'm not saying that, for the record. I just put it out there, and you come to the conclusion that you want to come to. you come to the conclusion that you want to. But it really bothers me that a son of the South from Georgia, an African-American man, first of all, voted to gut the Voting Rights Act. Whether he did it from influence of his wife or what. Really? Knowing people died, were lynched. I think of the 3 young men, Swerner, Cheney, Goodman, who were murdered because they were trying to get black folks registered to vote. I think of the Freedom Riders when they rolled through the South, getting beat, whites and blacks, trying to get black folks registered to vote. And a black man from the South is going to vote to gut it? And I say that respectfully. Let's come here to my home state. Sorry, know what happened there. But to my home state here. Sorry about that. You saw my green screen. Let me just see what's going on. Um, my home state here, okay, it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to go back to that, but that's okay. All right, just stay with me here. Just stay with me. Just stay with me. Stay with me. Okay. All right. So I was going to go. My iPad is gone out. So let me just tell you what I was going to show you. I was going to show you Greg Abbott a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, actually, sent a memo out to state agencies here in Texas that they are no longer to consider diversity when hiring. Or, I mean, so diversity is now one of the scapegoats. No inclusion. Okay? Just merit. Let me tell you why I have an issue with that. There are structural inequalities that prevent many African Americans from being able to compete when it comes to standardized tests. Okay? If, for example, let's say, you descended from slavery, as did I, and your great-great-grandfather was a slave. His son, your grandfather, was a sharecropper. They couldn't go to school. They had to work all the time. That's all they no school. Got to go to work. Drop out second, third grade. That's your great-grandfather. And then your grandfather. He too. No work. No school. Just work. In the fields, outside in the rain, on the job, but no work. Unlike his white counterparts in the same town who are getting educated, who are going to school, who are becoming literate. My father, for example, had a third grade education. He could barely read or write. I would have to read things to him and write stuff for him. A lot of times when he pay his bills, I would have to write out the check. Not because my father was unintelligent, but that he grew up under the heavy hand of Jim Crow. All right? So come down to me. Come down to me now. And I'm raised in this family that has no history of education, okay? My generation of my family, since my family arrived to America, from the time my family arrived to America, it was my generation, me and my cousins, who were the first ones to go to college. I am the first male, not female. I'm the first male in my family that were brought here from Africa. I'm the first male to graduate from college. The first one. And I dropped out in the 10th grade because education was not valued in my house. Work was. When I told my dad I was dropping out of high school, he wasn't really concerned about that. Fine, just come with me tomorrow and start working out here in the construction with me. What I'm trying to say is, it's kind of difficult to even explain to you. It's just that again, our forefathers grew up under the very heavy hand of slavery and Jim Crow and now systemic racism. And you were not valued going out and getting an education. No, some were, a few were, but many were not. So I end up in the classroom, and by the way, I did very well in grade school. Okay, back then they had A, B, C, D, E classes. I was in the A class. Okay, I was one of two blacks in the A class when I was in third grade, fourth grade, and I would get straight A's. Okay? But it was just one or two of us. In fact, the other person I grew up with, Cynthia Carr, if she ever hears this video, she would attest that she and I were the only two blacks, third and fourth grade and all that were in the A class in our school. This was after integration. They integrated my school in the third grade. I went the first, second grade, I went to an all-black school, C.W. Dobbins Elementary School. And then they integrated the school. That would have been 1970, I think it was. That was 15 years after Brown. 1970, 71, we then were sent to the white school, Wallace Elementary. So Cynthia Carr and I both were in the A class. And some other folks come to mind. Monteo Evans, I think the smartest guy I ever knew. I mean, just smartest dude I ever knew. But, so education was not a big thing, because we were told our value as black folks was working. Just work. And I remember that attitude was still prevalent when I taught high school. I taught high school chemistry. I had to force my black male kids especially to focus on education. I had to force them. And I forced them. I made them. I made them do it. I wasn't the kind of teacher where I was going to let them just come and just do nothing in my class. No way. No way. No way. I had been through too much, seen too much, know too much. No way. You're going to work in my class or you're going to fail. One of the two. And I don't want some coach coming to me. They did. Saying, Mr. Corby, can you let him go? No, I cannot let him go through. Who you think you're talking to? You don't know who you're talking to. I'm here for this young man. I'm here to drill education in this young man. Remember, I wrote it as part of the reason why I wrote a book entitled Education and Justice, How Public Schools Fail African-American Males. That's why I wish I had a copy of it right here. That's why I wrote that book. Because of what I saw in the public school system, both from the kids and from the system, the kids and their parents. I said all that to say, now take that kid whose great-great-grandparents, grandparents, great-grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, all that grew up in the country somewhere. School was not a priority. Work was a priority. Now set that same kid beside a white kid whose great-great-grandparents were, slave owners. Great-grandparents were business owners. Grandparents owned the pharmacy or owned the drugstore or something. Parents run a good business. All of them went to school, got an education, and now his generation, school has been a part of his family for generations. And even when we went to school, we went to those separate but unequal schools. So now take that family, put their child beside a white child who's had all kinds of advantages and privileges and say, okay, now you all are on the merit system. That's ridiculous. It's not that we're unintelligent, it's that there has been all types of hurdles to our progress and development. We see what you're doing, Greg Abbott, Ron DeSantis, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Mark Robinson, Clarence Thomas. We see what you're doing. So, Greg Abbott got rid of diversity and inclusion in the state of Texas, like so many other states. Okay? That is white nationalism. And the GOP and white nationalism has intersected in a big time way, in a blatant way. They don't even care if you know about it. They don't care if you see it. Who cares? Call us a racist. You call us what you want to call us. Their attitude is we're gonna fight for white nationalism. We're gonna fight for white supremacy. Call us what you want. Our leader has told us that we should fight and not be ashamed. We should fight. Our leader, Donald Trump, has told us what to do, and we are going to follow his orders. That's what we're up against, folks. When these folks talk about making America great again, they want to take it back to the days when I was a child, where black folks knew their place. When black people knew their place in America. That's what they're talking about, making America great again. What else can they be talking about? America has never been great for black people. Never. There was a small window, that 10-year window during Reconstruction, where things were looking maybe just a little bit hopeful. But they did everything they could during that 10-year period to make sure, no, you will never. You're no longer under the law of slave, but you'll never be equal to us. Now, what I've given you today is just the facts and the truth. You may not like it. You may not like it. But I can back it up. I can back every bit of it up. It's easy to show you what these last 400 years have been like for us. It explains why, after 400 years, we still own less than 3% of this nation's wealth. All right? So, that is going to do it for today. That is going to do it. I appreciate you listening. I forgot to do the introduction. You know, where I say that I am Attorney Augustus Corbett, also known as the Minister of Justice. And Chloe, by the way, she's been away for 3 weeks. I hope she's back next week. She's been moving, and son got married and so forth. But anyway, let me just do that introduction. All right. So I am Attorney Augustus Corbett, also known as the Minister of Justice. And with me I have blah, 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 blah. And together we are the Defiant Lawyers. Each and every Saturday we bring you a legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to empower you with the information you need to defy this unjust legal system. Please subscribe, like, share, comment. That's what I forgot to say at the beginning, but I just said it. All right? Someone's texting me. It's probably my wife. Let me see what she's saying. Okay. She is saying you got Facebook comments. All right. Very good. Let me see what they are. Yeah, got a bunch of them. Okay, let me see if I can find them because you see me looking all up like the old people do, trying to catch the stuff in my bifocals um, since my computer monitor is so far away from me. So let me just go to Facebook and I'll bring it up. Let me go to Facebook and I'll bring up your comments. Thank you, sweetheart, for reminding me about the comments because I do want to get to some of them. Okay. Hope I can do it this way. Swipe left to reveal. Here they are. Okay. Yep, here they are. My sister, my dear sister, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, Sister Abe Aldrich. She says basically DeSantis is passing anti black and brown laws. She has been riding with your boy. I tell you, Sister Abe, I appreciate you. Appreciate you so much. Um, my wife, examples of white nationalism and supremacy. So yeah, what my wife does is try to recap some of the things that I'm seeing in the comments. Sister Ave, you're right, Sister Ave. Mark just came out the box with that reparations thing. I mean that's just bizarre. That's bizarre. But I've seen it. Um, when I was a Republican, and I'm still conservative on a lot of things. You all, by the way, um, I'm very progressive where it comes to racial justice, but I am conservative. I'm right of center, you could say. Okay, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican. Um, but I've seen that black conservatives have to really say things like that to appease their white conservative colleagues. They have to say things like that to I mean, I've heard them say I'm not black. I ain't black. I'm not black. I've heard black conservatives say I'm not black. I mean, they feel the pressure to say those things in order to stay in the good graces of white conservatives. I mean, if you're going to be black and be a part of that, it's going to cost you. But it can be also very rewarding, right? Very beneficial. I forgot to say, it's been reported, for example, that Justice Thomas has received some lavish gifts from a billionaire from right here where we live at in the DFW area. Um, this man is very wealthy. I mean, his name and his family assets are all over Dallas. Okay, we are very familiar with the Crow family here. Okay, and these people, um, have done all sorts of things for Justice Thomas. Again, I don't know that they've influenced his votes or not on the court. I don't know, but it just looks bad. It looks really, really bad, very bad. The Bible talks about avoid the very appearance of evil. All right. Yes, Sister Ave, North Carolina is as racist as it always has been. Um, okay, and thank you too. Okay, so Justice Sherry Berry was defeated by a Republican justice in a close race. Okay, so that's what flipped it. All right, that's what flipped it. And Sister Ave, I wonder, is Justice Sherry Berry she's not the African American woman who ran for the Senate, is she? Let me know in the comments if you're still with us. All right, let's see what else. That's what I was trying to figure out. Um, okay, okay, I think I got to most of the comments. But thank you for those comments, you all. Thank you for riding with your boy here today, and appreciate it. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Um, you know what? We just got to be straight up about what's going on. Just gotta tell the truth, and hopefully, we will get the message out to enough people. enough people who can stop this tidal wave, this tsunami of white nationalism that I see coming. I see it coming. Okay. All right. So that's going to do it for me. It's a nice day outside. Want to get outside with the wife a little bit today. I truly, truly love and appreciate you, Rebels, for riding with us. You've been with us. Our channel is not about entertainment. It's not about foolishness. It's heavy stuff. And some folks don't want the heavy. They want the foolishness. I get it. I understand. But we're going to keep putting it out there. We're going to keep putting it out there. All right? So that's why, and it's basically why I'm saying to you all, those of you who want and desire the meat, the information, the knowledge, not to become hateful people, but to be knowledgeable, to know what to do, to know how to fight this thing. I'm a Christian, and remember, we Christians, we got to love even our enemies. That's what Jesus said. We got to love even our enemies, okay? And black folks, we do that anyway. I mean, we do that anyway. It almost seems like it's our nature to do that. And Jesus told us to do that, all right? So, but again, thank you for riding with us, and we're out of here. I'm gone. Peace.